the F1 Focus Podcast with Welman and Hendrik Verwoerd.
Welcome back to Formula One Focus. Hendrik is here to talk to us about the situation at Red Bull. We're sort of speculating what's going to happen now with the new management. Is it going to fall apart and the likes? Firstly, Hendrik, welcome back, and tell me, is Red Bull destined for sort of a corporate, entity that slips to the back of the grid, or are they going to overcome this?
Well, who knows? I think the question really is what is now going to happen now that Christian Horner isn't there anymore. Laurent Mekies is now taken over, obviously, as the Red Bull team principal from this weekend onwards, from the Belgian Grand Prix onwards. There was a very, very good and detailed analysis done by a very experienced journalist, Formula One journalist, Johnny Noble, this past week, and it's one that it completely rings true to me. His analysis of the situation and what Red Bull should be careful of. So what I'm basically going to say now are not really my thoughts, although I do absolutely agree with this. So thank you, Johnny. I appreciate that for giving at least the direction of thought. So basically, what Red Bull seems to be facing now is a situation of how will the team be managed, and also the bigger environment in which the Formula One team finds itself. The bigger Red Bull environment. How is the whole situation going to be managed now with Red Bull without Christian Horner there? The feeling is almost that if the main reason for Christian Horner being fired was the fact that he had so much power vested in him and in him alone, basically that he was, the all-powerful man that could, that had control over not only the Formula One team, but also Red Bull Technologies and Red Bull marketing, the new Red Bull engine program with Ford, Red Bull powertrains. And if the reason was that he was fired because especially the Austrian side of the Red Bull conglomerate, felt that he had too much power, then that the danger is that the team or the group can then fall towards the situation of corporate management, and this is something that they need to be very careful of. That they don't fall into a situation where, Mekies, for instance, is only the team principal of the Formula One team, that he has to answer to the board, and other people are in charge at the other entities, and they all have to sort of feed into, a committee that then decides, is the direction in which the engine development going sufficient for the way or does it fit into the direction in which the chassis is being designed, that sort of thing. So that you have almost a committee deciding on the direction of development. And the danger of that is, of course, that you don't get any quick decisions made. Johnny Noble makes the point, and it's absolutely true, that in the history of Formula One, it's never been, no team has ever been successful if it didn't have a strong leader that had the ability to make decisions and not having to answer to a committee above him. You can take any example from Frank Williams to Ron Dennis to Jean Todt at Ferrari, or anybody similar. Even today, I think I would argue that Zak Brown is in such a position at McLaren, that they may not necessarily be co-owners of the team, such as Toto Wolff, but they are in charge. These guys, they are in charge, and they are being given the freedom by the board of the owners, or by the owners of the team. They are given the freedom to make the decisions, and sometimes those decisions may be wrong, and sometimes they may not be popular. But you have to give the man in charge, or the person in charge, the freedom to make those decisions. And again, the question is now: will Red Bull possibly fall back into that situation where committees make decisions? And Johnny Noble points it out, that the irony is that Red Bull took over a team, a Formula One team, Jaguar, that was run by committee and was not successful at all, purely for that reason. They took over that team because they saw that there's an opportunity, and they appointed Christian Horner for that exact reason, that to put him in charge and to let him do his thing. So what he's saying, and he's absolutely right, is Red Bull should now try not to fall back into the situation where Jaguar found itself in, and being unsuccessful for that specific reason. We don't know, of course, what the direction is going to be. This is going to be the first weekend, coming weekend in Belgium, that Laurent Mekies is going to be in charge of the racing team, We don't know at this point what has been going on behind the scenes. There's been no word about, Christian Horner being relieved of his duties at the other entities that I mentioned. Although the feeling, as we said, I think on a previous occasion, is that yes, he will obviously have to relinquish those positions, but he will obviously be compensated for that in a very generous way, hopefully for him anyway. So this is all speculation, obviously, but I think it's a very good analysis of the current situation and the danger that Red Bull should try not to fall into in the way in which they manage the entire, let's say the racing group that includes the racing team and the technology company and the engine company and the marketing company.
The interesting thing is that Red Bull said no to the Porsche deal. They were very, very close to signing that.
For that exact reason, yes, absolutely.
For not wanting to fall into the corporate shenanigans of having to make decisions by committee, like you said.
Yeah,
but I think
Christian Horner said that's exactly what he said. He said, he didn't want to be in a position where he needed to report to the Porsche guys, on the direction of development, and that he wanted to have the full control, full authority vested in himself. So yes, absolutely.
I think Red Bull, there's a saying that says, hindsight is 20/20 vision. They're going to come to realize, for all his faults, Christian Horner was a fantastic team principal, CEO, whatever. 120 plus wins. How many championships, drivers' championships, how many constructors' championships? That doesn't fall from the sky. I mean, the guy might be tough, he might be hard, but that's why he's successful. And now to replace him overnight, the ripple effect in that team, that's the first thing. The team, people being up, a little bit upset or disturbed almost.
There's loyalty, obviously. The loyalty has been built up over years by people who have remained in the team. And, if you have a leader like that has a vision and then actually delivers on that vision, a team that's another point that Johnny Noble is making, that, the team was built around Christian Horner and he showed that his vision worked. And therefore, the loyalty was created and developed and built upon through the success of the team. People saw that, they're winning, and that builds a team. So it's a big factor. Absolutely.
The thing is, his leaving or his dismissal is going to leave a vacuum. I know Lauren Mackey is there, and we'll talk about it just now. But the personality of Christian Horner is going to leave a vacuum. And I'm sensing that vacuum is going to be filled by either Marco and or Jos. And this is going to be the end of the internal strife. It's going to be the start of more, if you're getting where I'm. There's going to be a bit more power struggle now, because Jos is now maybe going to feel that, I got rid of Christian Horner. I can, I'm sort of the de facto boss of this thing. That's not if Max stays in the team, come to think of it. We still don't know whether he's going to Mercedes or not.
I'm not sure about that. I mean, Jos is not an employee of the company or the group. So, if they want to, if he wants to be in a more controlling position than he is already, he will need to get a job at the company.
I don't think so. I think influence
position already where he can dictate. Well, not dictate, but I mean he's in a very strong position regarding the future of his son.
Yeah.
So whether it's an employee or not,
it doesn't have to be an employee. He just has to go to the newspapers. That kind of pressure that he's the guy that said last year that if Christian Horner stays in the team's going to fall apart. And he was driving that narrative. He's been driving it for a while now.
Yeah.
And to the degree you can say that he was successful in getting rid of Christian.
Yeah, because he's not an employee, so therefore he can basically say what he wants. There are no consequences for him, if he's highly critical of the team. But then again, the team uniquely, and we've made this point on many occasions, uniquely, Red Bull allowed the father of one of their drivers to be in such a powerful position.
Yeah.
Yes, it's Max Verstappen's father, but still. I'm not sure. There's an interesting sort of little narrative that's been developing over the last few months, and it's starting to surface more and more, and that is that Sebastian Vettel is starting to be mentioned more and more, and he's now starting to talk about it. First of all, possibly as a replacement for Helmut Marko, which I think makes a huge amount of sense because of his if he takes that position as the advisor to the Red Bull group for their young driver development program. That's basically what Marko is there for. That's basically what his description as an advisor is that, he's looking after the development program, and he tells them which drivers to sign coming out of the development program, the Red Bull Academy. So, and Marco is well into his 80s now. He's already acknowledged that he's not too far away from retirement. So Sebastian Vettel makes a huge amount of sense as his replacement there because of his experience and the leadership that he can show and the guidance that he can give to young drivers and that sort of thing. But then there's also another little thread that is now starting to surface regarding Mr. Vettel, and that is that he's being mentioned as a possible future FIA president. Not in this coming election, obviously. Not at the end of the year for the next term, but who knows after that? I mean, he's still in his late 30s. What is he now? I think, or is he 40 now? I don't think he's 40 yet. But anyway, somebody will know. But he's still fairly young. So that's another interesting possibility. He was asked about that this week, and he said, look, I know far too little about the role of the FIA president. I only know basically from the Formula One side of things, but I don't know much about the other role. But then he didn't say no, he's never going to consider it. So what he didn't say is probably what the story is. And again, thinking about it, I know we're going a little bit sideways off the subject now, but Sebastian as an FIA president again makes a lot of sense to me because he's a very wise young man. He's concerned about the wider picture. We know that already, he's been a strong supporter of sustainable fuel. He's running his own collection of Formula One cars, ex-Formula One cars on sustainable fuel. So the whole thing of sustainability is a big issue for him. And he's been a very strong advocate of environmental affairs or issues around the environment. And obviously, the mobility side of the FIA is a big role player in, the impact of transport and mobility on the environment. So, from a number of perspectives, I think it makes a lot of sense for Sebastian Vettel to not only become, Helmut Marko's replacement, but maybe in a few FIA president terms from now, once he's had the opportunity to learn a little bit more about, the wider activities of the FIA, a future FIA president, that makes a lot of sense to me.
Well, I just Googled it now while you were talking. He's Sebastian is 38. He's young.
Okay, so he's still fairly. I didn't think he was 40. Yeah, absolutely.
No, you're right. Talking about young, Lauren Mackey is 38 years old, still a young man himself, but seems to be some fairly good noises emanating from Formula One about his abilities.
Yeah,
probably a good choice there. It looks like a good man manager. People talk about it.
Logically, yeah. I think logically, it was the way to go. If you get rid of Christian Horner, you can't now start casting around other teams because there's things like gardening leave and stuff like that, and severance pay and buying people out of contracts and whatever. So the best thing for Red Bull from their point of view was having got rid of Christian Horner. Look in-house. So Lauren Mackey's as the team principal of Racing Bulls, that made absolute logical sense to promote him to the senior team. And obviously, he's a very experienced man in management positions. His roots lie in the old Minardi team and then in the Toro Rosso team. And he had a spell at Ferrari as well. And then he had a spell at the FIA. And then he came back as a team principal at Racing Bulls. So, he's highly experienced in the field. By all accounts, he's a very good person manager, a manager of people, which is important, as we pointed out a little bit earlier. Important, the human element of what is going on at Red Bull at the moment is very important. So he will obviously need to take charge and show that he's in charge very quickly. And I think he's probably first on top of his list is to make sure that Max Verstappen stays there, at least for next year.
Well, I think that's first on his list, but very close second is managing Yuki Tsunoda. Yuki is also from Racing Bulls. He's worked with Laurent before. He's looking forward to a bit more of a hand around the shoulder kind of approach, giving a bit more support than the Helmut Marko scolding. You better get better or kind of approach. Because Yuki is under pressure. I see lots of rumors saying he's not going to be renewed for next year. He's on his way out the door.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, absolutely. But the same goes for Isaac Hajar as well at Racing Bulls, because with his connection with Laura Mekis, and Hajar has had a very interesting and impressive, really, rookie season at Racing Bulls. But the thing is, I think a bigger thing for Mekis, and I'm sure he doesn't listen to me. But they need to get this RB21 to be manageable by both drivers. I would argue that this was probably one of the major reasons, the sporting reason why Christian Horner was fired, and that is that they developed this car for a one driver only, and therefore that meant that the second car could never score points, or on few occasions score any points. No driver up to this point, apart from maybe Danny Ricciardo, or maybe even, but that wasn't the RB21.
No.
So the development path of the current car was the wrong direction. You can't really, and we've said this. So what Lauren Mekies needs to do, I think, is to make sure that next year's car is not going to be a one driver car only. And that he must make sure that, as far as the development is concerned, that both drivers will be able to drive the car. Interestingly, one of the things that Wheatley said at Sauber, one of the reasons why they are starting to perform now is that they made the Sauber car more drivable. They didn't give it more performance. They didn't give it more downforce and stuff like that. All they did was they made it more drivable so that the drivers can control the car better and have trust in the car, that they trust what the car will do. So maybe, give up a little bit of performance is what Lekis needs to do at Red Bull for the rest of the season, hopefully. But I'm not sure that they can do much about the rest of the season. But at least make sure that next year's car is more drivable for both drivers, so that they can score points, and maybe not necessarily win every race of 2024, of 2026, but be competitive and make sure that both cars score the points.
Before we move on to this weekend's Belgian Grand Prix, if I was a Christian Horner, I would think back and say, listen, I went backwards too far to keep Max happy. Number one, making the car, developing the car to suit him specifically, to the detriment of a lot of other drivers. I mean, going back how many years now? And secondly, allowing Jos to be so powerful. I understand the need to, protect Max and keep him happy. But I think there was it went a bit too far. And that's what I think what happened here. And I think if he ever had to do something again, he wouldn't do the same. That's just my feeling.
I'm pretty sure you can almost describe it as emotional blackmail. I mean, Christian, I don't think he had much of a choice, because if it didn't happen like that, then the Verstappens could easily have walked. Where they would have gone to, that's another question.
Yeah.
And that is always the thing. You can threaten as much as you want to. You can threaten that you're going to leave and whatever, but where do you go and who's going to accept you?
Well, that's the thing. So in any sport, if you threaten the coach is going to say, listen, take a hike, bro. No matter who you are. Sport, rugby, soccer, you name it. I suppose when it's a Ronaldo or a Messi, you might think twice, but maybe Max is that kind of a driver.
Well, that is it.
The point is, if you're a really a good manager, you should have put your foot down. Treated him like any other. But anyway, that's just speculation.
That doesn't seem to be the trend in Formula One of late. And again, this is based on another very good analysis by a very experienced journalist on a very good platform. But the last 5 years or even 10 years, if you look back at how many team principals have left and how many are still in the position where they were, 5 or 10 years ago, the tendency in Formula One seems to be these days that team principals get fired. That's the corporate thing that we spoke about earlier on. They get fired because they don't perform just as much as soccer managers are being fired. You can be whoever you want as far as football is concerned. It seems international football. If your team doesn't perform in, I don't know, half a year, you get fired.
True. Yeah. Ruthless.
Yeah. It doesn't work like that in Formula One, but it seems to be, managements or boards don't seem to learn that lesson.
Well, you think about it, who would ever have thought that Christian Horner would be sacked in the middle of the season? Nobody was. You and I didn't see that coming, so nobody did. At least of all Christian Horner. Anyway, let's talk about the Belgian Grand Prix. One of my favorite races. Let's be honest. That's sweeping the three sectors. You have to set your car up specifically. You can go for the corners, or set it up for the sector 2. But then you're going to be a sitting duck in the race. Very exciting race. I like this. What can we look forward to this weekend?
Well, I think lots of excitement. There are a number of factors that are going to play a role this weekend. First of all, the weather. The weather is always unpredictable there. I see that there is some possibility of some rain on Friday. And that depends because that Ardennes region, I think I've been there 3 or 4 times for the Belgian Grand Prix, and every time you look at the weather forecast and it doesn't work out that way. So it's unpredictable. So that can be a cat amongst the pigeons, which it normally is. The other thing is it's a sprint weekend. It's our 3rd sprint weekend of the year after China and Miami. So there's only one practice session before the sprint qualifying on Friday. And then, of course, on Saturday, you've got the sprint race in the morning, and then your Grand Prix qualifying in the afternoon, and then the Grand Prix on Sunday. So not a lot of time for teams to prepare and to gain the data. Maybe weather factors will also play a role there, that you can prepare for one kind of weather condition and something else completely develops either in qualifying or in the race, the 2 races or the 2 qualifying sessions. And the other thing is also that they've got an interesting tyre combination to work with this weekend. They've got the normal 3 tyres, but they've got the C1 and then the C3 and C4. So you've got the hardest of the whole lot and then the 2 in the middle, as far as the compounds are concerned. And that will also be a very interesting thing in terms of the tyre strategy, how they're going to work out. Last year, of course, we remember that George Russell won the race on a strategy starting on medium and finishing on hard, only a one-stop race. But he was disqualified for the plank to be the car's plank that had been worn down too much. And the theory afterwards was that because of the one-stop strategy, the tires had worn down much more than they normally would with a two-stop strategy, and therefore the tires or the car ran lower to the ground at the end of the race. So he was disqualified after Mercedes won 2, and Lewis Hamilton inherited the race win last year. And the interesting thing also last year is that only 0.6 of a second covered the top 3 at the end of the race. Everybody else were on 2 stops, George on a 1-stop, and in the end he beat his teammate Lewis Hamilton by a half a second, 0.5, and then only a tenth of a second further back came Oscar Piastri in the leading McLaren. So anything can really happen. As you say, it's a spectacular track. It's a fantastic. I mean, just that Eau Rouge. You cannot believe how steep an uphill that is. I've stood at the bottom of that, and you look up. You look up into the sky to look, at the rise to Radillon. So a challenging race from a lot of perspectives, and something that one should really not miss at all. Every session.
Why the C1 and not the C2? What's the thinking behind that?
I think Pirelli wants to ensure that it's a 2-stop race. So that they would probably force the guys to run or to race on the medium compound, and then have the option of the harder one. But the harder one would not necessarily. I don't know. Last year was it the C2? I think.
It was,
so if you have an even harder compound, but the harder compound also doesn't work if the track temperature is too low. I see the forecast for the ambient temperature for this weekend is around about 20 degrees Celsius. So that means a track temperature of 30, maybe 32, 35, which is not very high.
No.
So if you have a too cool track temperature, the hardest compound may or may not work well. It really depends on how the handling characteristics of the cars are. McLaren obviously, I don't think would have any problem there.
Yeah, the tire whisperers. Talking about McLaren, they tested a new floor in Silverstone, and they were quite happy with it. I mean, that's just bad news for everybody else. They didn't want to test it this weekend because of the sprint. The sprinters, like you said, there's only one free practice. But that looks a bit ominous. I mean, McLaren's going to finish even further. It looks like, and Alonso said this himself, most of the drivers are now switched on to 2026, and they're just going through the motions of the rest of the season. Like you said before, we're over halfway now. This is the halfway point of the season.
Yeah. It's interesting. I mean, McLaren continues with their upgrades and their development, and so does Ferrari and Red Bull. Both Ferrari and Red Bull are going to bring, apart from McLaren, Ferrari and Red Bull are also going to bring major upgrades this weekend. Ferrari have been working on the rear suspension. They're going to bring they had a test day or filming day at Mugello last week. To test this new suspension. It's basically got to do with the setup of the suspension. The wishbone of the suspension is going to be mounted differently, lower, and that apparently has got to do with how low they can run the car. Again, I'm not technically all that strong, but that seems to be the thing that the problem with the Ferrari this year apparently is that the back and the front of the car don't talk to each other. If you understand what I mean. So there's a sort of a disconnect between how the suspension system at the front and the suspension system at the back reacts to things like fast corners or slow corners and how it handles that sort of thing. So apparently this is aimed at sorting that out, and Ferrari have been a little bit of an upward trajectory. What is the word?
Trajectory.
Trajectory for the last few races. So from their point of view, hopefully that will work for them. But then I expect that you will see most of the teams, and Red Bull is also bringing, I think, something to do with their floor this weekend. So I think for most of the teams, this is probably going to be the last upgrade or major upgrade for the season before they really turn their attention to developing things for next year. Because whatever works here at Spa is not going to work in Hungary the next weekend because of a completely different nature of the track. So, then they've got the 4 weeks basically, of which 2 weeks they've got to close the factory before they go to Holland. For the Dutch Grand Prix, and that's a fast track as well. So, and then of course we are well into the second half of the season, and I think from there onwards, it wouldn't make sense for any team really to try and still develop this year's car. Williams have already switched off their development. I think Sauber also basically have come to the last upgrade. That's something to watch out for. That where is McLaren going to be this weekend, and the battle between the two drivers. Let's not forget there's only 8 points between Piastri and Norris at this point. And Norris is a little bit on the up at the moment after the last 2 races that he won. And Piastri has been a little bit irritated by the situation both in Austria and at Silverstone. So it's going to be interesting how the two of them interact and how they're going to battle each other. And let's not forget, it's, as I said, sprint. So there's an additional 8 points for a sprint win up for grabs this weekend.
Yeah, there's your difference already.
That could make a difference. I don't like the idea that a sprint could eventually, at the end of the season, determine the outcome of the championship. But it is what it is, and this is what we've got to deal with. So Sauber on the up after the last few races. Are they going to continue with that? Aston Martin is young Fernando Alonso going to find his feet against his young teammate who's been beating him this year, at least as far as points is concerned. There's lots of things going on. Williams struggling with overheating, so what they try to do is to work on the overheating problem, and they said that they are willing to sacrifice performance to get the cars to actually finish, because once they in the race they are fairly strong. So up and down the grid, I think there's lots of intrigue and lots of interest.
Just on the subject of Williams, I don't think the Carlos Sainz experiment is working out. He seems to me to project the image of a dejected man kind of a thing, don't you think?
I don't know. He's a man that shows his feelings and his emotions. He's a Spaniard, so one would expect that. But I still think, and I've said this in the past, I still think that he's got the longer term view. Yes, he might not be happy. No driver is going to be happy if he doesn't get a car that performs well. And if you get stuck in the pits in Austria with burning, with brakes on fire, because the brakes got stuck on the grid. You don't like that. Obviously, you're not going to like that, and you're going to say it. But I don't think one should read too much into his unhappiness at the moment. He's on record on more than one occasion saying, this year is an interim year, and he's actually looking at next year onwards. It's like most drivers, as you said earlier on. I think many of them that are, 18 of the 20 drivers are not looking at the championship. They are looking at next year.
Yeah. Just lastly, before we finish, what's the latest on the Mercedes rumors? I saw some funny memes floating around about Toto knocking on the door or knocking on the window. What's happening? Because there's lots of noise, but nothing of substance.
Yeah, he was asked about that this week by the Austrian broadcaster ORF, and he said, "Look, we often have holidays. Both of them have yachts. Both of them enjoy going to Sardinia, and they've done it in the past. Both of them live in Monaco." So it's not a surprise that they are together or that they holiday at the same place. He said. He also said that the photographs that have been circulating on social media of him knocking on the door or getting onto Max's plane or whatever, that's all photoshops. And he says basically their main priority at the moment. He says the highest priority at the moment is George Russell and Kimi Antonelli. That he says that they're going to sort things out in the summer break. That's after the Hungarian Grand Prix, as he's been saying all along. He says he can't foresee any major change. He doesn't expect any surprises there. So obviously, I think that basically says that they are going to sign George, but it doesn't rule out obviously signing Max in the near future, because we're talking not only about 26 at the moment, but 27 onwards as well. And he said, Toto Wolff said, we cannot ignore the possibility that Max could come on the market. And he's absolutely right. No team principal would be doing his job if he ignores the fact that the best driver at this point amongst the current crop can be on the market. Yeah. So, to rule out that Max to say that Max is not going to drive for us, that would just be dumb of Toto to say that. But again, I think we have said this on a few occasions. I think Max is going to stay where he is. I think George is going to stay where he is, and Kimi is going to stay where he is for 2026. The question is, what is going to happen in 2027? And the difficulty is somebody like George going to be willing to accept, say, a 1-year contract at Mercedes for next year in order to make sure that he stays there? Because he might also want to leave if Mercedes is nowhere. On the other hand, he might want to be in a stronger position to stay if Mercedes comes out on top next year. Max, I think the trigger point is basically for Max that in what position is he in the drivers' championship by the summer break, which means by the Hungarian Grand Prix. Still 2 races to go. He's 4th at the moment. No, he's 3rd at the moment.
3rd.
He's 3rd at the moment. Red Bull is 4th, yes. So if he remains 3rd, that's the theory. If he remains inside the top 3, then he, the performance clause doesn't kick in. If he's outside the top 3, there are 2 races to go. Anything can happen. If he's outside the top 3, he can leave. And I think the same goes for Red Bull if Red Bull is outside the top 4. So we will have to wait and see. So, the summer break is going to be interesting, and there's going to be lots of stories coming on, but we still have Belgium and Hungary to go. So I think let's just wait and see what happens by then.
If Max pulls over mysteriously and doesn't finish the race, we know what's going to happen. So he doesn't score any points.
Yeah.
Or takes him out again, by accident. It's kind of a thing,
Yeah,
Anyway.
we'll see.
Thanks, Hendrik. That was interesting. Appreciate it.
Cheers.
Thank you,
Talk to you.
The F1 Focus Podcast with Envia Velman and Hendrik Verwoerd.